My name is Marcus Chen. I'm 34 years old, and 3 months ago, my parents made a decision that they thought would destroy me. But instead, it became the moment that finally set me free. Picture this. I'm sitting in my childhood living room, watching my younger sister Emma clutch a check for $300,000, my inheritance from our grandmother, while my parents explain that they've decided she needs it more because she's still finding her way at 29. Meanwhile, they look at me with that familiar mixture of pity and disappointment, assuming I'm just another struggling office worker who can barely make rent. What they didn't know? The struggling office worker they were looking at had just closed a deal worth $8 million in commission the week before. But here's the thing that really gets me, and I bet if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you'll understand this. It wasn't about the money. It was about finally realizing that no matter what I achieved, they would never see me as anything more than their disappointing son who didn't follow the family plan. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, hit that like button if you've ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in you the most. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why that $300,000 they gave away was the best money they never spent on me. To understand how we got to that moment in the living room, I need to take you back to where this pattern started. Growing up in a traditional Chinese-American family in San Francisco, there was always a clear hierarchy, and I was never at the top of it. Emma was born when I was 5, and from day one, she was the golden child. Straight A's came naturally to her. She was the star of every school play, captain of the debate team, and somehow managed to make even our strictest relatives smile with her charm. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sister. But living in her shadow was like trying to grow a plant under a solar eclipse. My parents, both successful doctors who had immigrated from Taiwan in the 1980s, had very specific ideas about success. There was the medical track, the law track, or the engineering track. Everything else was just hobbies that would eventually need to be abandoned for real careers. When Emma got into Harvard pre-med, the celebration lasted for weeks. When I chose San Francisco State for business, the silence lasted just as long. Marcus just isn't academically gifted like Emma, I overheard my mother telling my aunt during my high school graduation party. We're hoping he'll at least find something stable. That word, stable, became their ceiling for my entire life. Not successful, not impressive, just stable. Like I was a wobbly table they were hoping wouldn't collapse completely. But here's what they never bothered to notice. While Emma was burning out trying to maintain perfection, I was quietly building something they never saw coming. College was the first time I felt like I could breathe. Away from the constant comparisons, I discovered I had a talent for something my parents didn't even consider a real skill: understanding what people wanted and helping them get it. I started small, helping classmates find off-campus housing. I'd walk through apartments, notice things the landlords missed. This place gets amazing natural light. That one has incredible potential if you just rearrange the layout. This neighborhood is about to explode in value because of the new transit line being built. By sophomore year, I was making more money from my unofficial real estate consulting than most of my friends made at their campus jobs. By senior year, I was helping professors and staff buy their first homes. That's when I realized something that would change everything. Real estate wasn't just about properties. It was about understanding people's dreams and finding ways to make them reality. After graduation, while Emma was struggling through her second year of medical school, she'd switched from Harvard to UCSF, claiming she wanted to be closer to family, though I suspected the pressure was getting to her. I got my real estate license and joined Coldwell Banker. My parents' reaction was exactly what you'd expect. Real estate? My father looked like I'd announced I was joining the circus. That's not a career, Marcus. That's what people do when they can't do anything else. Maybe after a few years of this, you'll be ready to think about business school. My mother added helpfully. Get an MBA, work for a real company. Emma, to her credit, tried to be supportive. I think it's cool, Marcus. You always were good with people. But even her support came wrapped in that familiar tone of lowered expectations. Like she was encouraging a child who'd announced they wanted to be a dinosaur when they grew up. The first year was brutal. I'll be honest about that. While Emma was still living at home, getting her meals cooked and her laundry done while she studied, I was working 70-hour weeks, showing properties at all hours, learning every neighborhood in the Bay Area like it was my personal map. I sold exactly 3 houses that first year, made about $30,000 in total commission. My parents saw the struggle and took it as confirmation that they'd been right all along. It's not too late to take the LSAT, my father would mention whenever I came to family dinner looking exhausted. But what they didn't see were the relationships I was building. The first-time homebuyers who referred their friends because I'd helped them navigate the scariest purchase of their lives. The luxury clients who appreciated that I actually listened to what they wanted instead of just showing them the most expensive properties. Most importantly, they didn't see that I was studying the market like Emma studied anatomy. Every night after showing properties, I'd analyze sales data, track neighborhood trends, build relationships with contractors, mortgage brokers, and other agents who could help my clients succeed. By year 2, something clicked. I sold 12 homes and made $140,000 in commission. More money than either of my parents had made in their residency years. But when I mentioned it at dinner, my father just nodded absently. That's nice, Marcus. Maybe you'll be able to afford your own health insurance soon. They literally couldn't compute that their disappointing son might be succeeding at something they didn't understand. Year 3 was when I made my first real breakthrough. A tech executive from Google was looking for something special, not just expensive, but unique. I spent 3 weeks researching properties that weren't even on the market yet, building relationships with homeowners in the neighborhoods he loved, until I found him a mid-century modern home with panoramic bay views that the elderly owner was considering selling to downsize. That sale alone netted me $85,000 in commission. The executive was so impressed that he referred me to half his team at Google. Suddenly, I had a pipeline of high-end tech clients who appreciated my attention to detail and discretion. But even when I moved into my own 1-bedroom apartment in Pacific Heights, a neighborhood my parents couldn't afford, they assumed I was just house-sitting for someone, or had gotten lucky with a good deal. Emma, meanwhile, was struggling. Medical school was harder than she'd expected, and for the first time in her life, being naturally smart wasn't enough. She was competing with hundreds of other naturally smart people, many of whom also happened to be incredibly hardworking. She started having anxiety attacks during her clinical rotations. Came home crying after failing her first exam ever. Suddenly, the golden child was tarnishing, and my parents' world was shaking. But instead of this making them appreciate my steady success, it made them double down on protecting Emma. Every family gathering became about managing Emma's stress, celebrating her small victories, and ensuring she knew she was supported no matter what. I was still just stable Marcus, plugging along at his little real estate hobby. Years 4 through 7 were when everything exploded, but in the quietest way possible. I'd specialized in helping tech executives and venture capitalists find homes, and the San Francisco luxury market was absolutely booming. These weren't just sales. I was helping clients buy $3 million condos as starter homes, $8 million estates as weekend retreats. But more than that, I was building a reputation. When a venture capitalist wanted to sell his Noe Valley Victorian, he didn't list with just anyone. He called Marcus Chen because he knew I understood his world and could handle the transaction with complete discretion. My commission checks were getting larger and larger. $200,000 deals became routine. I had 1 month where I closed 4 transactions and made $340,000 in a single month. More than my parents made in an entire year, combined. I bought my own place, a stunning 2-bedroom condo in Pacific Heights with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Golden Gate Bridge that made visitors literally gasp. Cost me $1, $8 million, which I paid for in cash. But here's the thing about family dynamics. They don't change just because your bank account does. Especially when your family has decided who you are and refuses to see evidence to the contrary. At family dinners, when relatives asked what I was up to, my parents would still introduce me as Marcus, he's in real estate, with that apologetic tone, while Emma got Emma's in her surgical residency at UCSF, with obvious pride. When I bought a new car, a Tesla Model S, because I figured if I was driving clients around, I should look professional. My father assumed I'd leased it. Good thinking, Marcus. No point buying a car you can't afford. When I wore a $3,000 suit to my cousin's wedding, my mother complimented me on finding such a nice rental. They literally could not conceive that their stable son might be thriving. But Emma was starting to notice. During her surgery residency, when she was working 80-hour weeks and barely surviving on her $50,000 resident salary, she'd sometimes look around my place with confusion. Marcus, how can you afford all this on a real estate agent's salary? I do pretty well, I'd say, not wanting to make her feel worse about her own financial situation. But how well? This place must cost a fortune. I'd change the subject. Emma was struggling enough without me adding to her stress by flaunting my success. And honestly, I'd gotten so used to my achievements being invisible to my family that it felt weird to even consider making them visible. Years 8 through 10 were when I stopped being just a successful real estate agent and became something else entirely. A real estate investor and developer with a growing empire. It started when one of my clients, a venture capitalist named David Park, mentioned he was looking for investment properties, not to live in, but as part of his portfolio diversification strategy. You know the San Francisco market better than anyone I've met, he told me over coffee in my Pacific Heights condo. Have you ever thought about investing yourself? I had, actually. With all the commission money coming in, I'd been building up a substantial cash reserve, but I'd been conservative, just putting it in index funds and bonds like my parents had taught me. David introduced me to the world of real estate investment, and suddenly, I saw opportunities everywhere. A multi-unit building in the Mission that needed renovation, but was in a prime location. A commercial property in Soma that was undervalued because the owner didn't understand the neighborhood's trajectory. I started small, buying a duplex in Oakland for $800,000, renovating it, and renting it out for $6,000 a month. The cash flow was incredible, and the property appreciated 15% in the first year alone. But what really changed everything was when David invited me to join an investment group he was forming. 7 high-net-worth individuals pooling resources to buy and develop larger properties. Shopping centers, office buildings, residential developments. Suddenly, instead of making money transaction by transaction, I was building equity in properties worth tens of millions of dollars. The investment group's first project was a residential development in Oakland, buying an old warehouse, converting it to 24 luxury condos, and selling them to young tech workers who couldn't afford San Francisco, but wanted something cooler than the suburbs. My initial investment was $500,000. When we sold the last unit 18 months later, my share of the profit was $1. $2 million. That's when I realized I wasn't just successful. I was building generational wealth. But at family dinners, I was still just Marcus, who does something with houses. Emma, meanwhile, was finally hitting her stride in her surgical residency. The anxiety was still there, but she was learning to manage it, and her natural intelligence was starting to shine through again. My parents were so relieved to see their golden child glowing again that every conversation centered around her latest surgical success, which was fine with me. I'd learned to find my validation elsewhere. By year 11, last year, my financial situation had become almost absurd. I was personally closing $15–20 million in real estate sales annually, making somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000 a year just in direct commissions. But that was almost pocket change compared to the investment income. The investment group had expanded to 3 major developments and a portfolio of commercial properties. My net worth had crossed $8 million, and I was generating passive income of about $50,000 a month just from my investment properties. I'd also become something of a mentor to other real estate agents, speaking at industry conferences and writing articles for real estate publications. In our professional world, I was becoming known as the guy who really understands the luxury market and the agent who can close impossible deals. But at home, still just stable Marcus. The disconnect had become so extreme, it was almost funny. I'd have lunch meetings at Michelin-starred restaurants with clients who owned professional sports teams, then go to family dinner, where my parents would ask if I'd remembered to eat vegetables that day. Emma had finished her residency and was starting her fellowship in cardiac surgery. She was amazing at it, truly gifted in a way that made me proud to be her brother. But she was also exhausted, stressed, and making about $75,000 a year while working 90-hour weeks. One day, she came to my place after a particularly brutal shift and just collapsed on my couch. "I don't know how you do it, Marcus," she said, looking around at my home theater system and the fresh flowers I had delivered weekly. "Do what?" "Seem so content. I mean, I know surgery is supposed to be my calling, but sometimes I look at your life and think you figured something out that I didn't." I almost told her then, almost explained that I wasn't just content. I was thriving beyond anything our parents could have imagined for either of us. But she looked so vulnerable, and I didn't want her to feel like I was competing with her or showing off. "We all have different paths," I said instead. "You're saving lives. That's pretty incredible." "But you seem happy," she said. "Really happy. Not just successful, but actually enjoying your life." She was right. Somewhere along the way, while building this empire in secret, I'd also built a life I genuinely loved. I traveled whenever I wanted. I had season tickets to the Warriors. I belonged to a wine club that cost more per month than most people's rent. I dated interesting women who appreciated that I was successful, but didn't need them to validate my worth. Most importantly, I'd built a career doing something I was genuinely passionate about. Every day brought new challenges, new opportunities to help clients achieve their dreams, new deals that pushed my skills to their limits. But my family saw none of it. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. My grandmother, Nai, had passed away peacefully in her sleep at 94. She'd been declining for months, so it wasn't unexpected, but it was still heartbreaking. Nai had been the one family member who'd always seemed to see me clearly. "Marcus is the clever one," she'd tell people in her mix of Mandarin and English. "He watches, he learns, he builds. Emma is smart in books, but Marcus is smart in life." I'd loved her fiercely for seeing something in me that no one else in the family seemed to notice. The funeral was beautiful and heartbreaking. Extended family flew in from across the country. We shared stories, cried together, and celebrated a woman who'd lived through war, immigration, and the complete transformation of her family's fortunes in America. It was 2 weeks later that my parents called a family meeting to discuss Nai's will. "She left some money," my father explained, sitting stiffly in the same living room where I'd grown up being compared to Emma. $300,000 to be split between Marcus and Emma. Emma and I exchanged glances. It was more money than either of us had expected, and we both felt the weight of Nai's generosity. However, my mother continued, and I immediately knew there was a problem. Your father and I have been talking, and we think it makes more sense for Emma to receive the full amount. The room went very quiet. Emma's student loans are substantial, my father continued, looking everywhere except at me. And she's just starting her career. She needs this money more than Marcus does. But Marcus has been stable, my mother added, like she was complimenting me. He has his little real estate business. He seems to be managing fine. Emma needs help getting established. I looked at Emma, waiting for her to object, to point out that Nai had specifically intended for both of us to benefit. But Emma just sat there, looking uncomfortable but not exactly protesting. What do you think, Marcus? My father asked, in that tone that made it clear there was only one acceptable answer. And here's the moment I realized something that changed everything. They weren't asking what I thought. They were asking me to agree to something they'd already decided. Just like they'd done my entire life, they'd decided I was the disappointing son who would never amount to much. They'd decided Emma needed protection and support. They'd decided I was stable enough to not need my inheritance, but not successful enough to deserve recognition for that stability. I think, I said slowly, that you've already made up your minds. Don't be like that, Marcus, my mother said. This is about family helping family. Right, I said. Family helping family. That's when Emma finally spoke up. Maybe we could split it differently, like I could take 2/3 and Marcus could take 1/3? My parents exchanged looks. Even Emma's compromise assumed I needed less, deserved less, mattered less. The full amount makes more sense, my father concluded. Marcus will understand. And that's how I found myself watching my sister receive a check for $300,000, while my parents looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to smile and nod and play my role as the understanding, stable, unambitious son who was just grateful to be included in the family. I drove home in a state of shock that had nothing to do with the money and everything to do with the realization that had been building for years. My family didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a role in their family story, the stable one, the one who didn't need much, the one who would always be fine with less. Sitting in my Pacific Heights condo, looking out at a view that most people could only dream of, I felt something I'd never felt about my family before. Anger. Not hurt, not disappointment. Anger. I was a millionaire. I owned properties worth more than my parents' house. I'd built a business that generated more income than both their medical practices combined. I was respected in my industry, sought after by clients who could afford to work with anyone, and I'd done it all while they watched and saw. Nothing. For the first time in my life, I started to wonder, what if I stopped hiding? The idea was terrifying. My entire adult identity had been built around not needing their approval, not caring what they thought, being secure enough in my own success that their inability to see it didn't matter. But suddenly, it did matter. Not because I needed their validation, but because their blindness was insulting. To me, to Nai who'd believed in me, to everyone who'd worked with me and trusted me, and built success alongside me. I spent the next month in a strange headspace, going through the motions of my regular life, closing deals, managing properties, meeting with my investment group, while internally debating whether to say anything to my family. The decision made itself when Emma called me 6 weeks after the inheritance meeting. Marcus, I need to tell you something. she said, sounding excited. I paid off all my student loans with Nine Eyes money, and I still have about $180,000 left. I want to do something special with it. That's great, Emma. What are you thinking? I want to buy a condo, something small, but actually mine, you know? I've been living in that tiny apartment near the hospital, and I want to feel like a real adult. She was asking me to help her, I realized, to use my real estate expertise to help her buy her first home. I was thinking maybe something around $400,000. I know it's not much in this market, but with the inheritance as a down payment. $400,000 for a condo in San Francisco. She had no idea what real estate actually cost in our city, because she'd never had to think about it. She'd lived at home through medical school, then in hospital-provided housing during residency. Emma, I said gently, you're not going to find anything livable in San Francisco for $400,000. Really? But I see listings online. Those are either scams or condos the size of my bathroom that need $100,000 in renovations. There was a long pause. Oh, well, maybe I could find something further out? And that's when I realized I could help her find something further out. I could spend weeks driving her around Oakland and Daly City and San Bruno, helping her compromise her dreams down to something that fit her budget. Or I could tell her the truth. Emma, what if I told you there was another option? What do you mean? What if I told you that your big brother, the one who does something with houses, could help you buy something a lot nicer than you're imagining? Marcus, that's sweet, but I don't want you to co-sign anything or put yourself at risk. What if I told you, I continued, that I wouldn't be putting myself at risk? That I'd be helping you from a position of strength you've never imagined? I don't understand. Emma, I think it's time I showed you something. I picked Emma up the next Saturday morning and drove her to my office. Not the small desk I rented at Coldwell Banker when I started, but the actual office I'd been leasing for the past 3 years. A 2,000-square-foot space in a premium building in the financial district with floor-to-ceiling windows and a conference room where I met with my highest-end clients. Marcus, this is incredible, Emma said, walking around the space. But why? Didn't you ever mention you had your own office? Because no one ever asked, I said simply. I showed her the awards on the walls. Top producer for the Bay Area 3 years running. Recognition from the National Association of Realtors. Certificates from luxury real estate organizations. Photos of me with clients at closing ceremonies, speaking at industry conferences, cutting ribbons at developments I'd helped bring to market. Marcus? Emma said slowly, how much money do you make? Let me show you something else first. I drove her to my current development project, a 16-unit luxury building in the Mission that my investment group was converting from an old printing facility. The construction was nearly complete, and every unit was already pre-sold for between $1, $2 and $1. $8 million. I own a 15% stake in this building, I told her as we walked through the model unit. When we finish selling all the units next month, my profit will be about $800,000. Emma stopped walking. $800,000? From one building? This is my third project like this in the past 2 years. I could see her trying to do the math, trying to understand what I was telling her. Emma, I made $8 million last year, not gross sales, personal income. After taxes, I probably netted about $9 million. She sat down heavily on the granite countertop in the model kitchen. But Mom and Dad always said, Mom and Dad have never once asked me how much money I make, I said. They've never asked to see my home, never asked about my clients, never showed any interest in understanding what I actually do for a living. They decided when I was 22 that I was stable, and they've never updated that assessment. But Marcus, if you're making that much money, why didn't you ever say anything? It was a fair question, and I'd been asking myself the same thing. Because I didn't want to compete with you, I said honestly. You were struggling in medical school, then struggling in residency. I didn't want to make you feel worse by flaunting my success, and honestly, I got used to people underestimating me. It became a kind of superpower in business. But we're family, Emma said. We're supposed to celebrate each other's successes. Are we? I asked. Because 3 weeks ago, Mom and Dad gave you my inheritance without even asking what I might need it for. They assumed I didn't need it because I'm stable. They never considered that maybe I don't need it because I'm wildly successful. Emma was quiet for a long time, looking around the luxury condo that I'd helped create. Marcus, I had no idea. When they said you didn't need the money, I just assumed. I mean, you always seemed fine, but I never thought. I am fine, I said. Better than fine. But that's not the point. The point is that they gave away my inheritance without knowing anything about my financial situation. They made assumptions based on their own limitations and biases. What are you going to do? I'm not sure yet, I said, but I'm tired of being invisible. Over the next few weeks, I found myself in an unusual position. For the first time in my adult life, I was actively considering making my success visible to my family. It wasn't about the money. I genuinely didn't need the inheritance. But it was about respect, recognition, and the principle that family members should know and appreciate each other for who they actually are, not who they assume each other to be. Emma had become my ally in a way I hadn't expected. After seeing my office and the development project, she'd started asking questions about my business, my investments, my life. Real questions, not the polite deflections I was used to. Marcus, I feel terrible, she told me over dinner at my place one night. I've been so focused on my own struggles that I never paid attention to what you were building. It's not your fault, I said. I actively hid it. But I should have noticed. The way you live, the things you own, the confidence you have. I just accepted Mom and Dad's version of who you were instead of paying attention to who you actually are. That conversation gave me an idea. What if, instead of just telling my parents about my success, I showed them? What if I created a situation where they had to confront the reality of who I'd become? My parents' 30th wedding anniversary was coming up in 2 months. Emma and I had been planning to take them out to dinner at their favorite restaurant in Chinatown. But what if we did something bigger? What if we threw them a party that demonstrated, in a way they couldn't ignore, exactly what their stable son was capable of? Emma, how would you feel about hosting Mom and Dad's anniversary party at my place? Your place would be perfect, she said immediately. But are you sure you want to deal with all that planning? What if I told you I have a friend who owns one of the top event planning companies in the city? Because I did. Jennifer Liu had been one of my clients 3 years earlier, when I'd helped her buy a stunning Victorian in Pacific Heights for her family and a commercial space in Soma for her business. We'd stayed friends, and her company, Elegant Affairs, planned events for tech executives, venture capitalists, and celebrities. Marcus, you can't spend a fortune on Mom and Dad's anniversary party just to prove a point. What if the point is worth proving? I called Jennifer the next day. Marcus, how's my favorite real estate mogul? I need a favor, Jen. I want to throw my parents a 30th anniversary party, and I want it to be unforgettable. How unforgettable are we talking? I want every person who attends to understand that the son they thought was just getting by is actually doing better than they ever imagined. Jennifer laughed. Oh, this is going to be fun. What's your budget? Whatever it takes to make the point. I love clients who say that. Tell me about your parents. Planning the party became a project that consumed my free time for 6 weeks, but in the best possible way. For the first time in my life, I was going to use my resources not to hide my success, but to celebrate it. Jennifer and I designed an event that would be elegant, tasteful, and absolutely unmistakable in its implications about my financial situation. The party would be at my Pacific Heights condo, but we'd bring in additional furniture, lighting, and catering equipment to transform the space into something that could accommodate 40 guests comfortably. The catering would be from Atelier Cren, the 3 Michelin-starred restaurant where I'd taken clients but never family. We'd have a sommelier presenting wine pairings from my personal collection, bottles that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But the real stroke of genius was the gift. What do you get for parents who think their son is barely scraping by? I asked Jennifer during one of our planning sessions. Something that makes it impossible for them to maintain that illusion, she said immediately. That's when I decided I was going to pay off their mortgage. My parents still owed about $180,000 on their house in Sunset District. They'd been making payments for 25 years, and they were proud of how responsibly they'd managed their finances. Paying off their mortgage wasn't just a generous gift. It was a gift that could only come from someone with serious financial resources. I arranged for the payoff letter to be prepared in advance and had it framed professionally. The gift wasn't just paying off their debt. It was showing them, in black and white, that their son had $180,000 in liquid cash that he could spend without thinking twice. But I also wanted them to understand the scale of my business success, not just my personal wealth. So I invited some of my clients to the party. David, I'm throwing my parents an anniversary party, and I'd love for them to meet some of the people I work with. David Park, the venture capitalist who'd first introduced me to real estate investing, was immediately interested. Are these the parents who think you sell houses for a living? That's exactly right. Oh, this is going to be good. I'll bring Susan. Susan Park was a former tech executive who now served on 3 corporate boards. They were the kind of couple who got profiled in Forbes and donated wings to hospitals. I also invited Jennifer Chen, no relation, the CEO of a biotech startup who'd bought a $4.2 million home in Russian Hill with my help, and Michael Torres, who owned 4 restaurants in San Francisco and had recently purchased a vacation home in Napa that I'd found for him. These weren't just successful people. They were the kind of successful people my parents would immediately recognize as being in a different league from anyone they usually socialized with. The guest list was carefully curated. Family members, a few family friends, and a handful of my clients who'd agreed to attend and who would, just by being there, demonstrate the level at which I operated professionally. Emma was the only family member who knew what was coming. Marcus, are you sure about this? She asked the week before the party. It feels like you're setting up some kind of confrontation. I'm not setting up a confrontation, I said. I'm setting up a revelation. The night of the party, I was nervous in a way I hadn't been since my first $1 million listing presentation. Jennifer's team had transformed my condo into something that looked like it could be featured in Architectural Digest. The lighting was perfect, highlighting the panoramic views of the Golden Gate Bridge and the city skyline. The catering setup was elegant and professional. Every detail conveyed the same message. This was the home of someone who had succeeded beyond ordinary expectations. Emma arrived early to help me greet guests. Marcus, this is incredible, she said, looking around. Mom and Dad are going to be shocked. That's the idea. My parents arrived right on time, dressed in their nicest clothes but clearly unprepared for what they were walking into. "Marcus," my mother said, stopping in the doorway. This is your place?" "Welcome home," I said, giving them both hugs. "Happy anniversary." I watched them take in the space. The high ceilings, the custom lighting, the original art on the walls, the view that made people gasp. They moved through my home like tourists, looking at everything with obvious confusion. "Son," my father said quietly, "how do you afford all this?" "We'll talk about that later, Dad. Tonight is about celebrating you and Mom." The other guests started arriving, and that's when the real show began. David and Susan Park arrived in their Tesla, dressed like they were attending a tech conference where they might be keynote speakers. Jennifer Chen showed up straight from a board meeting, still carrying her Hermes bag. Michael Torres brought a bottle of wine from his personal collection that probably cost more than my parents spent on groceries in a month. I watched my parents try to process who these people were and why they were at their anniversary party. "Marcus," David said loudly enough for my parents to hear. "Thank you for inviting us. Susan and I were just saying that anyone who can find us the perfect home in this impossible market deserves our eternal gratitude." "It was my pleasure," I replied. "Finding people their dream homes is what I love most about this business." "Business?" my father interjected. "Marcus, who are these people?" "Dad, I'd like you to meet David and Susan Park. David's a venture capitalist, and Susan serves on several corporate boards. They're clients who became friends." David immediately understood the situation and played his part perfectly. "Clients?" He laughed. "Marcus, you're being modest. You're the real estate advisor for half the tech executives in Silicon Valley. We refer everyone to you because you understand our world and you deliver results that other agents can't even imagine." I watched my parents exchange glances, trying to recalibrate their understanding of what was happening. Jennifer Chen joined the conversation. "Are you Marcus's parents? You must be so proud. He helped me find the perfect home for my family and gave me advice on real estate investments that have already appreciated by 20%. He's not just an agent, he's a strategic advisor." "Strategic advisor?" my mother repeated. "Oh yes," Susan Park chimed in. "Marcus doesn't just sell houses. He understands market trends, investment opportunities, neighborhood development patterns. He's helped us build a real estate portfolio worth several $1,000,000. Michael Torres appeared with appetizers. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen, your son found me a restaurant property that transformed my business. I was looking for something in the Mission, but he showed me a space in Hayes Valley that I never would have considered. That restaurant is now my most profitable location." My parents were looking at me like they'd never seen me before. "Marcus," my father said slowly, "what exactly do you do for work?" Before I could answer, Emma clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. "Before dinner, I wanted to say something about my brother," she announced to the room. "For most of my life, I thought I knew Marcus. I thought he was my sweet, stable older brother, who was good at his job and seemed happy with his life. But recently, I discovered that I didn't know Marcus at all." She looked directly at our parents. "Mom, Dad, did you know that Marcus owns multiple properties worth millions of dollars? Did you know that he's one of the top real estate agents in San Francisco? That he speaks at industry conferences? That he's helped develop entire buildings?" The room was very quiet. "Did you know that Forbes interviewed him last year for an article about the luxury real estate market? That he's built a business that generates millions of dollars in revenue annually?" My mother was staring at me. "Marcus, is this true?" "Emma," I said gently, "you don't need to." "Yes, I do," she said firmly. "Because I've been watching Mom and Dad underestimate you for years, and I've been too focused on my own life to speak up. But tonight, everyone in this room except our family knew that you're successful beyond anything we imagined. That's not right. David Park raised his glass. To Marcus Chen, the most underestimated person in his own family. Everyone laughed and toasted, but my parents didn't join in. They were too busy trying to process what they were learning. Dinner was surreal. My parents sat mostly silent while my clients told stories about deals I'd closed, investments I'd recommended, and problems I'd solved. Each story painted a picture of someone who operated at a level far beyond what they'd ever imagined. Marcus found us our home in Russian Hill, Jennifer Chen told the table. We'd been looking for 2 years with other agents, seeing everything on the market, getting outbid on everything we liked. Marcus took one look at our wish list and said, "I think I know the perfect place, but it's not for sale yet." He spent 3 weeks building a relationship with the owners, and when they finally decided to downsize, we got the first call. "That's classic Marcus," Michael Torres added. "He doesn't just work the listings, he works the relationships. When I wanted to expand my restaurant business, he didn't just find me available commercial space, he introduced me to the landlord who became my business partner." Susan Park leaned toward my parents. "You raised an exceptional son. He has that rare combination of market intelligence, emotional intelligence, and work ethic that makes him irreplaceable in our world." My father cleared his throat. "Our world?" "The world of high-net-worth individuals," David explained matter-of-factly. "People who need more than just a real estate agent. They need someone who understands privacy, discretion, complex financial arrangements, and long-term strategic thinking. Marcus operates at that level." I could see my parents trying to absorb this information. Every few minutes, one of them would look at me with this expression of confused recognition, like they were seeing me clearly for the first time. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, I decided it was time for the gift presentation. "Mom, Dad, Emma and I wanted to give you something special for your 30th anniversary." I handed them the wrapped frame, my heart pounding. They opened it together, and I watched my mother's face change as she read the mortgage payoff letter. "Marcus," she said quietly, "what is this?" "It's your mortgage payoff confirmation," I said. "As of yesterday, you own your house free and clear. Happy anniversary." My father took the frame from my mother and read it carefully. "Son, this says you paid $179,847.32. "That's right." "Marcus," my mother said, and her voice was shaking, "where did you get this kind of money?" The room had gone quiet again. All my clients were watching this family drama unfold with obvious fascination. "I earned it," I said simply. "I've been earning it for years." My father set down the frame and looked at me directly. "How much money do you make, Marcus?" It was the first time in my entire adult life that either of my parents had asked me a direct question about my financial success. "Last year, I made $8 million in gross income," I said. "After taxes and business expenses, I netted about $9 million. My mother sat down heavily. $2.8 million? "This year is looking like it might be closer to $2 million, I added. There was a long silence. "But Marcus," my father said finally, "if you make that much money, why didn't you ever tell us?" And that's when I realized we'd reached the heart of everything. "Dad, in the 11 years I've been building this business, you've never once asked me how much money I make. You've never asked to see my office, never asked to meet my colleagues, never shown any interest in understanding what I actually do for a living. But 3 months ago, you gave my inheritance to Emma because you assumed I didn't need it. You made that decision without knowing anything about my financial situation. You assumed I was stable, and Emma needed help, but you never asked what stable actually meant in my case. My mother was crying now. Marcus, we had no idea. I know you didn't, I said gently, but that's exactly the problem. After the other guests left, with many congratulations and promises to stay in touch, our family sat in my living room and had the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Marcus, my father began, I owe you an apology. We both do, my mother added. We made assumptions about your life that were completely wrong. Why? I asked. Why did you assume I wasn't successful? They looked at each other uncomfortably. Because you didn't follow the path we understood, my mother said finally. Medical school, law school, engineering, those were the measures of success we knew how to recognize. And because you never seemed to need anything, my father added, you were always so independent, so content with your life. We thought that meant you were just getting by, not that you were thriving. Emma spoke up. But Mom, Dad, if you'd paid attention, you would have seen it. His apartment, his car, his clothes, the way he carries himself. He's been successful for years. We saw those things, my mother said defensively. We just assumed he was living beyond his means or getting help from somewhere. Help from where? I asked. We thought maybe you were dating someone wealthy, my father admitted, or that you'd gotten lucky with investments. I started laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. You thought I was a gold digger? We thought you were getting by, my mother said. We thought Emma needed more help because she was building a career that would eventually be lucrative, while you were just maintaining. But I've been building something too, I said. I've been building it for 11 years, and I've been building it incredibly successfully. You just never asked. There was a long pause. Marcus, my father said, can you help us understand? What is it that you actually do? So I told them. For the first time in my adult life, I explained my business to my parents in detail. I told them about the luxury real estate market, about working with tech executives and venture capitalists, about the investment group and the development projects. I showed them articles I'd been featured in, awards I'd won, properties I'd helped develop. I explained that I wasn't just selling houses. I was helping wealthy individuals make strategic real estate decisions, building long-term relationships with clients who trusted me with decisions worth millions of dollars. I'm not just successful, I said. I'm exceptionally successful at something I'm passionate about and genuinely good at. My mother was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, Marcus, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you've built, and I'm ashamed that I didn't know to be proud of it sooner. But I'm also confused, my father added. If you've been this successful, why did you hide it from us? It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself. Because I got tired of feeling like I had to prove myself to you, I said honestly. When I first started making money, I wanted to share it with you, to show you that I'd found my path. But every time I tried to talk about my work, you'd change the subject or make comments about real careers and stability. So I stopped trying. And because Emma was struggling, I added, looking at my sister. Medical school was hard for you. Residency was brutal. I didn't want to make you feel worse by talking about how well I was doing. Emma shook her head. Marcus, that was my journey to figure out. You shouldn't have hidden your success to protect my feelings. But also, I said, I learned to like being underestimated. In business, it's actually an advantage when people assume you're less successful than you are. They let their guard down, they underestimate your negotiating position, They reveal information they shouldn't. So our dismissal of your success actually helped your career? My mother asked. In a weird way, yes, but it hurt our relationship. My father nodded slowly. Marcus, we've made some serious mistakes. We've been seeing you as the person you were at 22, not the person you've become at 34. And we've been so focused on managing Emma's challenges that we never celebrated your successes, my mother added. The inheritance thing, Emma said suddenly. God, Marcus, that must have felt terrible. Mom, Dad, you basically told him that his financial needs didn't matter because you assumed he was barely getting by. My parents looked stricken. We need to fix this, my father said. The inheritance should have been split equally, like Nai intended. It's not about the money, I said. I truly don't need the money. But it is about the principle. It's about being seen and valued as an equal member of this family. You're not an equal member, my mother said, and for a moment, my heart sank. You're an extraordinary member, she continued. You've achieved something incredible while we weren't even paying attention. That makes you pretty remarkable. The weeks following the anniversary party changed everything about my family dynamics. My parents started asking questions about my work, real questions with genuine interest. They wanted to understand the real estate market, the investment strategies, the business relationships I'd built. Can you explain how you knew that Oakland neighborhood was going to appreciate so dramatically? My father asked during one family dinner. Can you show us the Forbes article? My mother requested. For the first time in my adult life, they were curious about my professional expertise, rather than worried about my professional stability. Emma and I grew closer too. Without the weird dynamic of me hiding my success to protect her feelings, we could relate to each other as equals who'd both chosen challenging career paths and found success in different ways. You know what's funny? She told me one day. I always felt pressure to be the successful one in the family. Learning that you've been quietly crushing it this whole time actually takes some pressure off me. You're crushing it too, I pointed out. You're a cardiac surgeon. You save people's lives? Yeah, but you've built an empire, she said. And you did it without anyone pushing you or expecting it from you. That's actually more impressive. But the biggest change was in how I felt about myself and my relationship with my family. For years, I'd carried this weird resentment about being underestimated, while simultaneously working to maintain that underestimation. I'd been angry about being invisible while actively trying to stay invisible. Now, for the first time, I felt like my family saw me clearly. Not as the disappointing son or the stable son, but as Marcus, someone who'd found his passion, developed his talents, and built something remarkable. The inheritance situation resolved itself naturally. Emma insisted on splitting the money, despite my protests that I didn't need it. It's not about need, she said. It's about Nai's intentions and family equity. She transferred $150,000 to my account, and we both donated the extra money to a scholarship fund at SF State for first-generation college students pursuing business degrees. But more importantly, my parents started treating me like the successful adult I'd become, rather than the uncertain young man I'd been a decade earlier. One unexpected consequence of coming out of the closet about my success was that it actually accelerated my business growth. My clients had always been impressed by my discretion, the fact that I never name-dropped or bragged about my other clients or my own success. But now that my family knew who I really was, I felt more comfortable being authentic about my expertise and achievements in professional settings. I started accepting more speaking engagements at real estate conferences. I wrote a guest column for the San Francisco Business Times about luxury market trends. I allowed myself to be profiled as one of the 40 under 40 real estate professionals in California. The increased visibility led to even higher caliber clients. A tech CEO who'd read my Business Times column called me directly to help him find a compound in Atherton. A venture capital firm hired me as a consultant to help them evaluate real estate investment opportunities across the Bay Area. My income jumped to $3.8 million in the year following the anniversary party, and my investment portfolio crossed $12 million in value. But more than the financial growth, I felt liberated professionally. I could network authentically, speak confidently about my track record, and position myself appropriately in the market without feeling like I was betraying some commitment to modesty. David Park noticed the change immediately. "Marcus, I don't know what's different, but you seem more confident in meetings lately, more willing to assert your expertise." "I stopped hiding who I am," I told him. "Good," he said. "False modesty is expensive in our world." Another unexpected benefit of the family revelation was that it opened up my personal life in ways I hadn't anticipated. I'd always been somewhat guarded in romantic relationships, never quite sure how to explain my lifestyle without seeming like I was bragging or trying to impress women with my money. I'd dated successfully, but I'd never felt completely authentic. 6 months after the anniversary party, I met Sarah at a charity auction for the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. She was a corporate attorney who specialized in mergers and acquisitions, and she immediately understood my world. "Real estate development and investment," she said when I explained what I did. "That's fascinating. The legal complexity alone must be incredible." It was refreshing to date someone who saw my career as intellectually interesting rather than just financially successful, someone who understood high-stakes professional environments and didn't need me to downplay my achievements. "I have to ask," she said on our third date, "do you always live this well, or are you trying to impress me?" We were at my place, and she was looking around at the art, the view, the custom, everything. "I always live this well," I said honestly, "but I'm not trying to not impress you either." She laughed. "Good. I was hoping you weren't putting on a show." 6 months later, Sarah moved in with me. A year after that, I proposed to her during a weekend trip to Napa, at a vineyard where we were staying in the owner's private guest house, another connection I'd made through my real estate network. My parents loved Sarah immediately, not just because she was accomplished and intelligent, but because she obviously appreciated and understood who I was rather than who they'd assumed I was. "She sees him clearly," my mother told Emma after meeting Sarah for the first time. "The way we should have been seeing him all along." 2 years after the anniversary party revelation, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible when my parents were giving away my inheritance. I decided to start a family foundation. The Chen Family Foundation launched with an initial endowment of $2 million, focused on providing college scholarships and small business loans to first-generation immigrants and their children. Emma joined the board immediately. "This is incredible, Marcus. You're creating opportunities for people like our parents were when they came to America." My parents were overwhelmed. "Marcus," my father said, "we came to this country with nothing, hoping our children would have better opportunities than we did. You've not only succeeded beyond our wildest dreams, you're creating opportunities for other families to do the same." The foundation work gave me a new sense of purpose beyond just building personal wealth. We funded scholarship recipients at SF State, helped immigrant entrepreneurs secure small business loans, and partnered with community organizations to provide financial literacy education. But it also demonstrated something important to my family. The success I'd built wasn't just about personal achievement or luxury lifestyle. It was about creating resources that could make a difference for other people. "This is why Nai would have been proud of you," my mother said at our first foundation fundraising dinner. "Not just because you succeeded, but because you're using your success to lift others up. Last month, Sarah and I bought our first home together. A stunning Victorian in Pacific Heights that we're renovating as our family home. We're planning to start trying for children next year, and I find myself thinking about what kind of family environment we want to create. I don't want my future children to feel like they have to prove themselves to me or compete for my attention based on their career choices. I want them to know that I'll be proud of them for becoming who they're meant to be, not for becoming who I think they should be. Emma is thriving in her surgical career and is now engaged to another doctor she met during her fellowship. She's confident and happy in a way she never was when she felt like she carried the weight of being the successful child in the family. "It's funny," she told me recently, "when I thought I was the only one who was supposed to succeed, everything felt so heavy. Now that I know we're both successful in our own ways, I can just enjoy my own journey. My parents have become my biggest champions, which is both gratifying and slightly amusing. They brag about my business success to their friends, share articles I've been featured in, and ask detailed questions about my investment strategies. We have a son who's built an empire," my father told his golf buddy recently, loud enough for me to hear. "Started from nothing and built something extraordinary. It's taken some getting used to, being seen clearly by my family after so many years of invisibility. But it feels good. It feels right." Looking back on the journey from that day in my parents' living room when they gave Emma my inheritance to now, I realized that the money was never really the issue. The issue was visibility, recognition, and respect. For most of my adult life, I'd built my identity around not needing my family's approval, while secretly resenting that they never offered it. I'd convinced myself that their inability to see my success didn't matter, while simultaneously feeling hurt by their blindness. The anniversary party wasn't really about showing off my wealth. It was about forcing a conversation that we should have had years earlier. A conversation about who I really was, what I'd actually achieved, and how our family dynamics had prevented them from seeing me clearly. The truth is, I could have initiated that conversation at any time. I could have insisted on being seen, demanded recognition, or simply been more open about my success. But I chose the path of secret achievement and quiet resentment, which served no one well. What I learned through this experience is that family relationships, like business relationships, require clear communication and honest representation. You can't expect people to appreciate what you don't show them, and you can't resent them for not seeing what you actively hide. My parents weren't malicious in their assumptions about my life. They were working with incomplete information and their own limited understanding of success outside traditional professional paths. When I finally gave them complete information, they adjusted their perceptions immediately and enthusiastically. Emma wasn't trying to take something that belonged to me when she accepted the inheritance. She was accepting what our parents offered based on their assessment of our relative needs. When she learned the truth about my financial situation, she insisted on making it right. The real transformation wasn't in my bank account or my business. Those had been growing steadily for years. The transformation was in my relationship with my family, and more importantly, my relationship with myself. I stopped being the secretly successful son who resented being underestimated and became the openly successful son who could be appreciated for his actual achievements. I stopped hiding my light under a bushel and started letting it shine, which benefited not just me, but everyone around me. Today, as I write this from my home office overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, I'm preparing for another milestone. Sarah and I are expecting our first child in 6 months, and I'm about to close the largest deal of my career, a $50 million commercial development project that will net me nearly $2 million in commission. But more than the professional success, I'm grateful for the family relationships we've rebuilt. My parents know who I am now. Emma and I are closer than we've ever been, and Sarah sees me clearly from the beginning. The inheritance that started this whole journey? We ended up using it to fund the first year of our Family Foundation's scholarship program. Nine Eyes' money is now helping first-generation college students pursue their dreams, which feels exactly like something she would have wanted. I think about that day 3 years ago when I sat in my parents' living room, watching Emma receive a check that should have been split between us, feeling invisible and undervalued. I never could have imagined that losing that inheritance would be the catalyst for gaining something much more valuable. Authentic relationships with my family based on who I really am, rather than who they assumed me to be. If I could go back and talk to that version of myself, I'd tell him, stop hiding. Stop assuming people can't handle your success or won't appreciate your achievements. Stop protecting other people's feelings at the expense of your own authenticity. Most importantly, I'd tell him, the people who truly love you want to celebrate your success, not be protected from it. Give them the chance to see you clearly and trust them to rise to the occasion. Because in the end, that's exactly what happened. When I finally let my family see who I really was, they didn't resent my success or feel diminished by it. They felt proud, impressed, and grateful to finally understand the remarkable person I'd become. The money they gave away was just money. The relationship we rebuilt was priceless. And that's a return on investment that no real estate deal could ever match. If you've made it this far, thank you for letting me share my story. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family or underestimated by people who should know you better, I hope this gives you courage to step into the light. Sometimes the people we love just need better information to love us better. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this story and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between hiding your success and risking family dynamics? I read every comment and love hearing your stories. Until next time, remember, you don't have to stay small to make other people comfortable. The right people will celebrate your growth, not resent it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.